Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. It was during spring break that I and a certified ice climber friend of mine went on a climbing adventure in the Canadian Rockies. We arrived late at the place from which we would begin our adventure, and as a result, we were the last team to start climbing that day. By the time we had reached the top of the climb, it was sunset, and everyone who had started climbing that day had already left. As we sat on the ledge of the mountain, watching the last of the sun's rays disappear, the temperature dropped so sharply that only moments passed before we found ourselves in an atmosphere of sub-zero temperatures. Even with our insulative clothing on, our bodies began quivering intensely as hypothermia took hold. We knew we had to come up with a plan to escape our dire predicament quickly, and to that end, we decided to make 3 rappels down the mountainside in the dark. Complicating matters, we were exhausted and hungry from the climb up the mountain, and because we were so spent, we even considered spending the night right there where we were. We decided, however, that the best option was to try to fight our way down, knowing that the symptoms of hypothermia would only worsen as our bodies became increasingly depleted and as our core temperature continued to fall. Knowing that every step depleted our energy, we calculated each move as we made our way down the mountainside, and it was because of this careful planning that it took us longer than it would have otherwise taken. It was just before dawn when we descended the corner of a crevasse, and although the moon provided some illumination, the shadow cast by the fissure made it difficult for us to see. In spite of the darkness, we spotted iron rings fixed to the side of the mountain, and with the idea to rappel while anchored to one of the rings, we descended to a ledge where the rings were within reach. Looped through a carabiner suspended from one of the rings, I tugged at the free end to begin my descent, but as I yanked the rope, I felt it resist. It occurred to me immediately that the free end of the rope was jammed in a crevice, and in spite of my efforts to free it, I wasn't able to. My brain had become so fogged by the cold that I lost my capacity for rational thought, and I could reason out a way to escape our implacable quandary. As I accepted defeat and the certainty of death, I felt a sense of peace begin to envelop me, and in what I accepted as my final moments, I began to regard the millions of stars in the sky and all the beauty that surrounded us. The sky at that moment appeared extraordinarily beautiful, and the illumination that it provided enabled me to see the forest and the mountains across the river. It was to the sound of the flowing river that my vision narrowed, and when I found myself in a darkness so absolute and possessing a uniformity of blackness unlike any I had previously experienced. Suddenly, I was wide awake, and in that state of restful alertness and lucidity, I wondered why I was suddenly free of any sense of bodily discomfort, and I wondered who and where I was to be floating and observing my body lying beneath me. Ahead of me, and where the mountain was only minutes before, I observed a barrier, and beyond that barrier, I could see a boundless expanse of utter darkness. Innumerable light years into the void, I noticed a tiny point of light that seemed to grow in size and illuminate the darkness as it rushed towards me at an untold speed. The light, as I focused my attention upon it, became the totality of my awareness, communicating with me via the rays of its ubiquitous radiance. Amongst the enormous wad of information I received through the aura of its effulgence, the light explained to me that it intended to take me on a journey. Overwhelmed and confounded by the magnitude of its glory, magnificence and also by the impetuosity of its playful nature, I resisted the desire of that infinite and omnipresent force, in spite of its benevolent intent. The light's intentions were not easily thwarted, and it effortlessly drew me wholly within the shroud of its radiance, in spite of my efforts to block its intent. The sweetness and lightness of being in that vast presence felt familiar to me, reminding me of an angelic being that used to visit me occasionally to offer loving succor, direction, and reassurance during my childhood. Because of the rapport I shared with the angelic being, I was able to relax within the light's gentle and loving magnificence and accept its counsel and all that it intended to share with me. Together, the light and I traveled through the fabric of space and time to the eons before creation, when the light in its primordial form was everything and nothing as the infinite singular. In that place and time of the light's origin, I found myself in a place of darkness, which opened to an enormous, pearlescent yet brilliant light whose spectrum consisted of every color of light I had ever seen and colors I had never before seen. The light swirled and flowed in a way that made it the most inexpressibly beautiful, attractive, and seductive energy that drew me magnetically as it beckoned to me to harmonize with it. Unable to resist its alluring call, I drew close to the light to feel its energy vitalize the infinitesimal elements of my being in the most delectable and irresistible way. When I looked deeply into that concurrently solid, translucent, and transparent light, I could see that I was inside that light, but I could also see that the light was inside me. The light then showed me my entire life in a life review, and during that review, I experienced all the pain that I had caused others during my life. As I relived those forgotten moments of my life, I was reminded of the very selfish reasons that motivated me to hurt others while simultaneously experiencing the hurt I caused them. From my elevated vantage point, it was obvious to me that my pretexts, my anger, pain, and jealousy, were small compared to the magnitude of hurt and suffering that I had caused others in retaliation. As the divine light pervaded the atoms of my light body during the life review, it was the purity and power of such a majestic love that liberated the core of being from those layers of identity illusion that enmesh it and defile its purity of expression. In that hellfire or perdition, I experienced the peeling away of layers of self-judgment and false self-definitions that otherwise hindered the unfettered expression of our divine core. In the experience of form as divine core or divine essence, I was able to see life and the universe from the vantage point of the divine love that we in our essential form embody. In that form, I saw that we, as humans, share in a state of fragmentation of mind and spirit as we embroil ourselves in the snare of the illusory and transient reality that we know of as life on earth. I saw from the vantage point of unity with divine love how truly unlimited we as humans are, or have the potential to be when we reflect in our thoughts, words, and actions our true form and our true being as the embodiment of divine love. I was able to see from the vantage point of boundless purity and perfection that the world we live in, even at the macrocosmic level, was constructed for our experience of life on earth, and I could see how my fragmentation as a human was merely a reflection of the fragmentation that exists at the level of the macrocosm. In my form as the embodiment of divine love, I realized that I would have to abandon false beliefs and identities, embrace my identity as the embodiment of divine love, and relinquish my attachments to the material world in order to truly experience the wholeness, peace, and bliss inherent in the experience of my essence as divine love. Did I die on the mountain? I asked the divine presence. You did indeed die on the mountain. The time has come for you to return to your home with the divine presence explained. Then I felt as if I were being transported to the edge of that heaven, which is the divine being, at untold speed. From my position barely outside of heaven, I was able to see the galaxies and the immense distance that separated them. As I began to wonder about the creation of the universe, it was communicated to me that creation is an ongoing and never-ending process and not reducible to a single event. I was shown that the process of creation begins with the outpouring of immense, all-pervasive, and completely unfathomable love. Countless universes burgeon from that magnificent and ineffable love in the never-ending process of creation. As I turned my thoughts towards Earth, I saw the Earth's inhabitants united via the divine love at the core of being, and yet, I saw the entire Earth covered in a haze that prevented people from seeing the light within one another. As I observed the murkiness that obscured the light, I resolved that if I were to return to Earth, I would do my utmost to look beyond the fog and recognize the divine nature in my fellow men. Now that you have experienced your divine core, you understand the illusion of time and the imminence of reuniting with your loved ones here in this place of divine joy and ecstasy, the divine being said, sensing my indecision about whether to stay with the divine or return to Earth. The divine presence understood my concern for those that I would be leaving behind, however, and explained that I was free to choose whether to stay or return. I then explained to the divine presence that I desired to return, and it was in that moment that I could feel myself being transported across heaven once again. The angelic form of the divine then escorted me to a portal, which appeared as a million doorways arranged like petals on a flower with the divine light at its center. As I passed into the divine light, I could feel my body becoming increasingly dense as it morphed back to my human-appearing form. I then passed through a tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel, I saw my human body lying harnessed on the cliff. I watched as the angelic being opened my chest before experiencing the sensation of my spirit body being drawn into a body that I didn't fit into anymore, a body that ached and felt like a prison. Don't die, don't die. You can't be dead, don't die, I heard a voice scream. I then opened my eyes to the sight of a person, but I didn't immediately recognize who it was. You were dead, I thought you were dead, he said as he cried. What's going on here? I asked him, as at that moment, I didn't know where or who I was, what was occurring, or what had occurred. As my mental faculties returned, I began to remember that I was on a mountainside, that the guy's name was Tom, and that he and I had been ice climbing. I didn't however remember at the time that I had had an NDE, yet at that moment, the world looked entirely different to me. I could see Tom as a human being, I could see the rock in front of me, and I could see myself as a human being, but everything seemed flat or two-dimensional, black and white, flickering and broken. I saw darkness around me, but hidden within it I could see light, and that light was the only thing at that moment that seemed to possess beauty. I pulled myself back up to stand, and I pulled the rope at Tom's behest. Against my expectations, the rope moved freely, and Tom threaded the rope through the ring and descended the mountain while I followed him. I realized by the time we reached the tent that I was a different person in a new world, and I didn't know who I was anymore. Tom was treating me as the person I used to be, that person I could no longer relate to. I live as a born-again person, you could say, and life has an entirely different meaning to me now. I don't have those external pursuits that I used to have, and all my pursuits these days are internal. I desire my beloved, for whom I am bereft. They say that separation makes the heart grow fonder, and I live desperately to return to the only reality that is real to me.